Okay, David, this is my fish tank. And those are anemones. That guy right there. It's a nasotang, the gray guy. And then the guy behind him, that's a flame angel, the one that just showed up. And then he's a majestic, the blue and yellow one right there. So, got some chromis in here. That's a coral, some more coral, snails, which you'll need a bunch of. You can see those guys. There's some cleaner shrimp back there. You know, basic reef tank. That's sort of going back. So here's kind of the stuff you need. So we'll look up here. So very important, you need lots of light. And so you can see here, so the long bulbs are complex fluorescence, so they're 48-inch compact fluorescence, and that's what gives you your blue, or the actinic, as they call it. In addition to that, I've got these metal halides, so there's two of those, and they're 250 watts a piece. So like I was saying, it's about 4 watts per gallon if you're not doing LEDs. If you're doing LEDs, then you just kind of have to, they're kind of new, so I'm not sure exactly what you need for that, but you can do your research. So here I've got about 700 watts, so I've got 200 in the compact fluorescent bulbs, which are, you know, tubes basically, if you can see that, and then 500 in the two metal halide bulbs. So, and then you can see there's a fan back there. Those wires, those are thermocouples, because I've got fans that kick on and off depending on the temperature. And then up here, I've got a little auto fish feeder. I found that was pretty useful. Let me put this up like that. And then down below. So here's down below. Like a long view of it. So let me scooch back a little bit, see if you can get a better view. So basically this is a sump type system, which means that if you look up here in the tank, you've got an overflow, which is that thing at the very back there. And basically what happens is the pump pumps water up through those outlets there. And as it pumps it up, water pours through the back, through the grate, basically. And that water ends up coming down a pipe, which ends up down here, which is that T right there, comes around this way, and then over here. So those two pipes actually are the overflow, and that comes into a filter sock, which you can see right now it's kind of pouring over the sock, so I need to change my sock because it's gotten a little filled up. So basically, if you're doing live rock, which is this stuff, right, live rock, you can do what's called a Berlin method, which basically is live rock and a protein skimmer. And so you need some type of mechanical filtration, or, you know, basically pulling the crud out of the water, so you can use this filter sock for that. So in addition to having a sump, which is basically just a fancy name for another tank that sits down below, like this guy, you need a couple pieces of equipment. So you have your sump. In your sump you put your inlet to the water, which is accomplished through the filter sock. Next to that we have probably the most important piece of equipment in the marine aquarium, and that is the protein skimmer here. So basically what this does, and it's kind of hard to see, but if you look in there, you'll see there's a bunch of bubbles, and what it's doing is it's basically bubbling up, and all the proteins stick to the bubbles, and then they end up percolating up through this cup, and all that stuff up there, that's called skimmate, they call it. It's basically like proteins that got stripped out of the water, and it's the nastiest stuff. It kind of reminds me of like the junk you get out of your carpet when you clean it, and that basically allows it to be stripped out of the water before it breaks down, and so it keeps your biological filter from having to overwork by having that. So that you absolutely need. You know, the sump you would need, they have hang on the back versions of this if you didn't want a sump underneath, but I've done both, and this is a lot easier and a lot cleaner setup. If you do this, you need to buy a fish tank that has an overflow built into it. So when you buy your tank, you want one that actually has an overflow. You can't put those in after the fact. They have some that sort of hang off the back, but I've used those and they're not the best. So, got your protein skimmer. Over here in my side of my sump, which you can kind of see, is kind of caca looking. Basically, this is what they call a refugium, which is a little area underneath where you can put plant life or, you know, little critters of different types. So basically what I typically have in here, I don't have right now because it's died off, is you put algae in here, and then rather than algae growing in your main tank, it sort of grows in the tank down here. So you put it in your sump so that it strips all the nutrients out so you don't have it growing in your main tank. It works okay. It's not, you know, there's a lot better ways of doing it. One of the better ways of getting rid of algae is this little guy right here. So this is what's called a phosphate reactor, and basically that brown stuff in there is a media that absorbs phosphate, and you can see it kind of tumbling around there. And so the water gets pumped through that and it strips out the phosphate, which is one of the two things that algae feed off of. Phosphate and nitrate really are what drive your algae. So one of these is sort of, that's optional. You don't really need that for a main tank. Same thing with the thing over here. So this thing to the right of it is an aqua UV sterilizer. So basically it kills any bacteria or parasites in the water so that the fish stay healthier. It also kills algae. You can see this is kind of the unit itself, and then this is the transformer for it. So I just have it sort of tucked up there. Those two things are optional too. The proteins, or not the protein skimmer, I'm sorry, the UV sterilizer is kind of nice because if you don't have it, you know, your fish will get sick and you'll have to treat them. Even if you do have it, they can get sick, but it just reduces the probability of infecting other fish. So those two things are optional. This, once again, was a phosphate reactor. This is a UV sterilizer. Protein skimmer you absolutely need in your sump. The other thing, obviously, is if you're pumping water down, you need to pump it back up. So this right here is a pump. So the one I'm using right here is called a Mag Drive 18. So it's 1,800 gallons per hour. That's its basic rate at what they call zero head, which means if it's pumping basically on the ground, it's 1,800 gallons per hour. If you pump it up, you know, to 5 feet here, straight up in the air, these return lines go up through the bottom of the tank, which I'm kind of having a hard time showing you here, but basically they go up through there. It's that braided line, and then they go back into the tank, and there are those returns right there. So there's one on that side and one on that side, and so I probably get close to 1,000 gallons per hour circulation through this pump system. And then I've got 3 other pumps on top, power heads they call them, that do probably another 1,200. So I think total I probably have somewhere between 2,500 and 3,000 gallons per hour flow. Now if you're doing not a reef tank or just doing fish, it doesn't need to be nearly that much. You know, I would probably shoot for 10 times an hour. So if you got a 100-gallon tank, I'd shoot for 1,000 gallons per hour circulation. It doesn't all need to be through your main pump. You know, you can have a smaller pump and use power heads inside your tank to basically supplement that. These are what I mean by power heads. Like that little guy there, that's a Hydor power head. So I've got him, he's 800 gallons per hour. There's another one, he's 550. And I think this one's like 400, so it's a 1,200. This is another 550, so 1,750, so about 2,700. So in addition to that stuff, so water comes through the pump, goes up, follows, comes over here, part of it. This is a chiller. So you can see here, basically, it's essentially an air conditioning unit for the water. And you can see right here my tank's running at 77.1 degrees. So if it gets up above 80, this chiller kicks in and brings the temperature back down. And so typically, you know, in the summer it's going to get nice and warm, so the water will actually rise and it'll kick in. So if you're in a place and you're running your tank and you can't keep the temperature down, and basically if it gets probably above about 82, you're going to start losing stuff. 82 is even pushing it. You need to invest in one of these. So they rate them for your tank size, so you can sort of figure it out. And what you usually want to do is get one that's about one size bigger than what you need. So I think this is called a JBJ Arctica chiller. And so the Arctica chillers, I kind of like them. So this, I believe, is a 5th horsepower, maybe a 1/4 horsepower. So it seems to do the job. This, I said, was a mag drive pump. This is a 2 Little Fishes Phosband reactor. This is an aqua UV sterilizer. And then this back here is an ASM G1X protein skimmer. And so that's the one I would probably recommend, the ASM G1X if you get one. This last thing over here this is basically my new little trial. So in here I've got media that supposedly reduces nitrates, and I've been trying that, and we'll see how that goes. I don't have enough information on it yet to tell you if it's good or bad. It's obviously optional. I just try to make things easier on myself. So that's kind of optional. The other things back here, you can sort of see if I can get to them. That guy, and there's two other ones. Those are dosing pumps, and basically they run during the night, and they dose trace elements into the tank. So these little drip lines right here, they dose calcium, alkalinity, and then a bunch of trace elements. So good for corals. You don't need them for fish. The only other thing that's probably worth mentioning is, so over here you'll see all my power strips. You'll want a GFI outlet, so if you don't have one, just change the outlet out to GFI. You have no idea how many times over this little tank here, I used to have a little fixture that sits up here. Now I've got an LED one that sort of hangs, but I had one that would sit over here, and I knocked it into the tank twice. So GFIs come in handy, especially when you're dumb enough to knock a light fixture into your tank. You don't want to die, and you don't want to shock your fish either if you can help it. So, and then the other thing, so you see here, that's actually a timer, that little dial. There's another timer down there. So at night, what happens is the lights will go to kind of a blue effect. So I'm going to unplug the main lights to show you kind of what they do at sunrise and sunset. So at sunrise and sunset, do this, we'll do this. So this is kind of what the tank looks like, and I'm sure you can see it turned a lot more blue. So that's sort of the effect of just the blue lights running. And so for an hour before and an hour after the main lights run, I do that. That can vary. You can do half hour before an hour, half hour up to probably 2 hours on each side if you want. The other thing I probably want to mention is, you want to sort of pay attention to airflow. So here's my tank, right? It's sort of the underneath, the top, and then below. So it's sort of built in the wall. So airflow is kind of important. So in my design, what I did is I cut slats down here so that when the doors close, you can see the light coming through, so that air can actually get up and through there. And then I found a website that sells basically equipment for cooling electronics. And so here you can sort of see I've got this little dual thermostat readout thing. And so depending on the temperature, each one of those has fans that they kick in or out. And so at the very, very top, you can see up there my setup, there's fans basically all along the back there that you can't really see, but they kick on at different times, and they pull air from the bottom. They draw it down from the bottom up through the back of the tank and basically out. So that helps vent the lights, and the same thing with the chiller. You need a lot of air for your chiller, because if it's not, it's just going to basically heat up inside there and melt itself. So in my case, the chiller pulls air through the vents underneath here. There's the chiller, and it actually vents through a pipe in the wall over here to this duct. So it looks like another heating vent, and basically that lets the chiller blow air out. So kind of in conclusion, things you do need: you need a good pump, you need a good protein skimmer, you need somewhere to put the protein skimmer, so that's what the sump is, which is this tank down here. And then you may need a chiller, depending on your system. You may want a phosphate reactor. You may want a UV sterilizer. Those are all optional things. I'd set the tank up and then see sort of how it does, and that'll drive whether or not you need them. And then obviously you need some good lights. So hope that helps. If you have any questions, give me a holler. All right, talk to you later. Bye.